All right, so we are back, and the next session I've been looking forward
Everyone.
to.
I'm glad
And
we're all
how are you doing, Fist?
talk. Um, I'm not
It's
sure
a
where
little.
Mike is, but we
I'm
have
here. I'm here. I'm here.
a dev
You-
pseudo anon really, and he's been building ShakeDex, decentralized exchange for handshake names, Block Explorer, which is a handshake block explorer, and a different implementation of the Bob Wallet in a different programming language called Go. So it's exciting to have another pseudo anon.
Yeah, there's a little bit of I think some internet connection with Fist, but yeah, I just thought it's pretty funny that one anon person is inviting another anon, and Kurumi is great. I mean, he did a session at HandyCon that was really well, one of the top received. So I'm sure we'll get some interesting insights today about ShakeDex and decentralized exchanges.
I'm really glad you enjoyed the talk. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
But your vocoder isn't on.
Yeah, I opted not to do the vocoder today since I'm trying to optimize for intelligibility this time around.
Wow.
I
Okay.
gotcha.
Yeah, no, my vocoder only works on one machine, and unfortunately, it is not the machine that I do my presentations on, and so there would have been a lot of ASCII art to build today if I was to do that. So here we
Awesome,
are,
man.
face reveal at 10,000 subs.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Let's get those subscribers going.
There we go. Cool. I'm happy just to get started.
Yeah.
Otherwise, whatever works. We good?
Yeah, go for it, man. It's all yours. The stage is all yours.
All right, awesome. So my name's Kurumi Amari, and I'm an anime character that does stuff in Handshake. And there are a couple of things I want to talk about today. First, I'm going to go over a little bit about who I am. I'm going to talk about what I'm building. How does it work? Why does it matter? And how can you help? If there are two things that I want you to walk away from this presentation with, it's here's ShakeDex, my project, and what it does, but also here's sort of the power of permissionless innovation on an open permissionless blockchain and the impact that small teams can have. And as a result of that, I hope to sort of inspire people here to contribute to Handshake, because now is probably the best possible time to do that in the life of any public blockchain. And we can do so many amazing things together. So, one other thing. My talks are generally pretty compact. And I'm also going to keep this one relatively high level. I'm not going to get too much into the kind of technical details. So if you do have questions, just spam them into the chat and I'll answer them at the end. Definitely going to be plenty of time to answer any questions people have as we wrap up here. So with that, like I mentioned, I'm Kurumi. I'm an anime character, and I make open source software for Handshake. I've done a bunch of things in this space. So I've been involved with Block Explorer. I've contributed to Bob. I also made the API that the Bob extension talks to. But today, we're really going to be talking about ShakeDex, which was sort of my entry into the Handshake space and one of my favorite projects that I've had the opportunity to work on and lead. And ShakeDex is really two things. And I'm going to get into the details of what these two things are as the presentation goes on. But it's both an open protocol that facilitates the exchange of these names. And like I mentioned, I'll explain what an open protocol is. But it's also a set of products that make interacting with that protocol really, really easy. And understanding the interplay between those two things is really important, not just to understanding ShakeDex, but also understanding crypto and some of my points at the end about how to get started contributing in a space like this one. So let's get started by walking you through how the protocol works. So at a high level, all a protocol is it's a way for two machines to talk to each other. And because this is a blockchain, those machines might be thousands of miles apart, and they use the blockchain to basically enforce the rules of how they're going to talk to each other. So I'm going to walk you through in plain English how the protocol works now. But first, we need a little bit of context. So on the traditional web, no one really owns TLDs. If you want to become a registry, which is the company that is allowed to create subdomains off of a TLD, you have to buy it at auction from ICANN. So, you become an accredited registry, you put in your request to buy one of these TLDs at auction. It goes to auction. If you win, you then become basically the prime broker of that TLD. And then you can either sell subdomains off that TLD directly, or you can lease that out to registrars. And that's where most of us end up interacting with, the domain name system today. We're not owning .com, we're owning whatever.com. And as a result of the accreditation and also just the way the sort of domain name system works, there isn't really a strong secondary market for top level domains. I know that, like Unregistry, I think was one of them, recently offloaded a whole bunch of its top level domain inventory. But it's relatively rare in the big scheme of things for that to happen. It's just not necessary, and it's a little bit difficult to do that. And also those TLDs sometimes can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But that's very different on Handshake. So Handshake is just an open, permissionless blockchain. And what that means is any business or any old Joe Schmo that owns Handshake coins can go and buy one of these TLDs. But one of the interesting things about Handshake, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so pumped about the future of Handshake as a project, is that these names are really powerful. Not only can you do all of the things that you would otherwise be able to do with the TLD, so you can host subdomains, you can host websites, etc., but you can also use them for things like decentralized identity. So log into my social network or log into whatever website with my Handshake top level domain. I can use them as a payment address where I can actually receive money using an identity that nobody can take away from me. These are all really cool things that you can only do with a decentralized naming system like Handshake, and Handshake happens to be one of the best executed. But this introduces a problem. Handshake as a protocol can only support roughly 50 million of these names. So what this means is that over time, as these names become more and more useful, they're also going to become more and more valuable, which means that everybody that wants to use one of these names is going to have a very strong incentive to want to trade them. And in crypto, there's usually two ways you can trade your crypto assets, of which your Handshake top level domain is a crypto asset. You can either use a centralized provider. So that would be like, buying Bitcoins on Coinbase. Coinbase holds your Bitcoins for you and you can trade them or whatever else and withdraw them when you're done. Or you can use a decentralized protocol to exchange directly with your counterparty. And you're able to do that because blockchains are programmable. And they use these things called smart contracts in order to make that happen. So to kind of tie it all back together here, the protocol is just a description of what these smart contracts should look like in order to allow anybody to trustlessly exchange one Handshake name for a bunch of Handshake coins. And I'm going to walk you through how that process works now. So if you've ever done a traditional domain exchange, you've probably seen a process similar to this one. You give your name to some escrow, and there's usually like a trusted intermediary like your GoDaddy or your Dan.com or whatever that kind of acts as the broker. Someone signs an agreement saying that they're willing to buy this name, and then the funds get exchanged and the names get exchanged. And so in the case of ShakeDex, the process is really, really similar. The first thing that happens is you transfer your name to an escrow address that protects the buyer. So escrow address sounds really fancy, but you can think of it as just an address on the blockchain that is subject to the constraints that I've written out in plain English for you on this slide. I won't get into too much of the details of how, the Handshake, blockchain works, but there are two things you need to know. When you own a Handshake name, it's possible for you to revoke it, which means you basically just ditch it back to the public auction pool. It's kind of like saying, well, I don't want to sell you this art anymore, so I'm going to put it in a paper shredder. And you can also back out of a transfer once it's been initiated. That's called a cancel. And if I'm buying a name, I don't want either of those things to happen. So the point of the escrow is to programmatically prevent those things from happening. So that's the first step of the protocol. We send it to the escrow. The next thing is I create a bunch of binding agreements that then protect me, the seller. And what these agreements say is they say that anybody who pays me a certain amount after a certain date and I'll explain the significance of the date a little bit later on, is going to get this name. So when you combine this with the escrow, both parties are protected. The buyer's protected and the seller's protected. And that's really important because there is no ICANN, there is no GoDaddy or whoever else that you can go to for dispute resolution. We need to make sure that, the code is written in a way such that everybody is protected by default, because in blockchain land, once a transaction is executed, it's atomic. There's no way back. So the last step then is to fund. So somebody includes the buyer includes the agreement to pay the funds. They also include the funds. Both of these are signed with the buyer and seller's private keys, and then this gets broadcast on the blockchain. And at this point in time, the name is the buyer's. Technically speaking, the buyer has to wait 48 hours, and that window allows the seller time to cancel. But remember, the escrow contract prevents you from canceling. So you basically just have to wait 48 hours, finalize the transfer, and then you're done. The name is yours. And this was done completely without any type of intermediary. You don't have to KYC your counterparty. You don't have to know anything about them. All you need to know is that the things that you're signing conform to this protocol. And that's one of the beautiful things about crypto. The technology basically informs the relationship between buyer and seller and allows really interesting things to happen. But this alone isn't really interesting enough. And the reason it's not interesting enough is because most people want price discovery for their names. So if I just go out and say I'm selling this name for $2,000, that's one thing. But if I have a really valuable TLD, I want to basically put it up for auction. And so if we use the date clause of the the pre-signed agreement, and I combine multiple of them, we can create an auction. And I'm going to show you how that works. So let's start with one of these. So we're going to say 5,000 handshake after October 31st. 4,500 handshake after November 1st, so on and so forth until I reach my reserve price. What I end up with is a Dutch auction. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, a Dutch auction is basically an auction where the price starts high and ends at a lower reserve price, and the price is lowered periodically as time goes on. So when I took this screenshot, it was about a month ago. This particular name started at 22,000 and is now at 21,000 and is going to end at 20,000. And again, all of this is enforced entirely using the programmability properties of the Handshake blockchain. And this is, in my opinion, really, really cool. But there's another problem here. It's really difficult for normal people to kind of wrap their head around how these protocols work. There's lots of protocols on the internet. Every website you go to, is talked to using the hypertext transfer protocol. But to most people, that's just, I'm visiting a website. So ShakeDex, the protocol, is then built into a bunch of ShakeDex supporting products, of which Bob Wallet is one of them. So this screenshot was taken directly from Mike's amazing tutorial on how to buy and sell handshake names using ShakeDex in Bob. So many thanks to Mike for putting this together. But the idea here is that, you need something to custody your crypto keys and custody your money, because at no point in that protocol does ShakeDex ever take control over user funds. And that's a feature, not a bug. But it does introduce a dependency on a wallet. And so as a result of how blockchain communities work, Bob integrated directly with ShakeDex. And so here's how that works. When you go into Bob, there's an Exchange tab. And what you can see is all the names that you've listed. So you can see Pull Request, Surfboard, and Tor were all names that Mike listed. There's a list of fills, which basically means these are the auctions that I bought that I'm waiting to finalize the transfer to myself for. And then a list of live auctions. And these are the actual auctions that are live on the website. When I go and create a listing, this is going to define the start, end price, and duration of my auction. And when I click that place listing button, when the escrow transfer is complete, Bob is going to go and upload all of those pre-signed agreements to shakedex.com, which is a website that just collects those so people can see what's available and functions very similarly to any other kind of domain trading website that you would expect to see on the traditional web. And lastly, when you want to place a bid, you just click the fill button and this pops up and you click fulfill. And at that point, the auction is complete. So I'm going to show you what shakedex.com looks like now. Again, keep in mind that this website is basically read-only. All of the write stuff happens within Bob. And you can see that with the little cat icon next to fulfill auction. But when you post your name, you're going to get a visualization that looks like this, that shows you the state of the auction at a particular point in time. And then you can also go into this view and view all of the names that are available, their current bids, and also manually submit your pre-signs if you want to, like if you generated them using a CLI tool or something different. So that's sort of the product side. But Handshake, really, really early as far as blockchains go. There's a ton of infrastructure that needs to be built. So as a result, these are the sort of current stats that we're looking at for ShakeDex. So 26,000 HNS is about $8,000 of volume. We've done about 2,000 auctions, of which 224 have been purchased by a counterparty. And Handshake is really early in its life, and these numbers I think are pretty good because they're numbers that were created despite how difficult it is right now to interact with ShakeDex. Users really, really want a kind of web-based experience that mimics the sort of centralized websites that they're used to. When they have to go into a desktop application that uses gigabytes of data in order to store all of the blockchain data and validate it, it's a huge barrier for people to overcome. And the other thing is, telling people to do things like custody keys, etc., are all really, really scary to the average user. So even though ShakeDex itself was a really powerful concept, there's a ton of sort of underlying base layer infrastructure that still remains to be built, and a bunch of work that we still have to do as developers to get Handshake to the point where it's kind of the decentralized primitives anyway, are going to be usable by regular people. So I'm going to walk you through some of ShakeDex's roadmap and then kind of tie it all back together. So to help in this effort, we're going to integrate the Chrome extension. People have been really hammering the Chrome extension over the course of this conference, and I think they're absolutely right to do that. That Chrome extension is going to be a massive unlock for not just ShakeDex, but the entire Handshake community. Some of you may or may not be familiar with MetaMask. MetaMask is a Chrome extension wallet that Jackie actually worked on that custodies keys for the Ethereum chain. And what that lets you do is it lets you build a website that talks to the blockchain. And that's really, really cool because it means you can do everything directly from the website that you're working on. So we're about to do this ShakeDex redesign, which not only gives ShakeDex a brand new coat of paint, but also gives you the ability to buy and launch auctions without ever leaving your browser, without ever having to download the entire chain state. It all happens directly within the Chrome extension. And I'm really, really excited about this because I think if we pair this with additional liquidity and additional people interested in using Handshake, we can create an amazing outcome that I'm going to walk you through separately. So a little bit more about ShakeDex's upcoming roadmap. So again, all these things, so this redesign and then all these things that I'm about to talk to you about, they depend on there being robust wallet infrastructure that integrates directly in the browser, because no one's going to use ShakeDex if we don't have that. But once we've integrated that, we can do some really cool things that I'm going to enumerate these really, really quickly. The first thing we want to build is storefronts. So the nice thing about Handshake, and this is very different from the traditional domain name system, is that whenever you synchronize a Handshake node, you basically get the state of every single top-level domain on the quote-unquote internet. And so what that means is people can put text records or other things inside of those domains that allow them to basically list their domain name for sale without ever having to go to a specific website. So anybody can go and create a big list of listings, of domain name listings, just based on the state of the blockchain at a current point in time. And what that in turn lets us do is on ShakeDex create binding offers. So if I know that so-and-so is interested in selling their name, I can create a binding offer using similar smart contracts to the ones that ShakeDex already supports. And that seller can just click the button, accept this. No need for KYC, no need for a new website login, no need to know anything about your counterparty. You just click the button and the name is exchanged, and you're able to trust that the code is going to make that happen well. Next, as we get more volume, ShakeDex will start taking fees. But one of the nice things about the way that ShakeDex is architected is that the only kind of centralized component is the ShakeDex API. And the ShakeDex API, even though it is, a database that I run, it's open. So anybody that wants to put ShakeDex listings on their website, so if you're a regular registrar, if you're somebody else that's interested in crypto, can get that data automatically. And if you then facilitate a transfer of one of these names using ShakeDex, your platform, whatever it may be, can earn a rake on the exchange fees that ShakeDex generates. And I anticipate as time goes on, those numbers will go up pretty significantly. Next, we're talking about more integrations. So this kind of follows from the monetization idea. We've got, I worked on Block Explorer, so I want to integrate it with that. Basically, the more ways people have to integrate with ShakeDex, the better. And lastly, this is somewhat separate from ShakeDex, but is really important to the functioning of a healthy blockchain. We need better infrastructure and we need better liquidity. And one of the best ways to do that is to partner with folks that are, in the traditional financial system to allow people to buy Handshake with a credit card and then use it immediately on Block Explorer, immediately on ShakeDex. And that, I think, is going to create the kind of fun experience that we want people to have buying and selling these effectively like powerful NFTs through Handshake names. So I'm going to tie it all back together now. What I hope you've kind of seen from this talk is that, none of these projects exist in a vacuum. This is very different from your kind of typical industry conference where you've got lots of companies, but each company is kind of out to its own end. And the game is kind of zero sum in the sense that companies compete and then whoever wins kind of kills the other one. With a chain like Handshake, the more people use it, the more utility it has, the more people who hold the token are going to be better. The better off the people are going to be who hold the token. So sort of you create the rising tide that raises all boats. So at the bottom layer, you have the chain itself. You have Handshake, which in this case was created by some of the best people in the industry. On top of that, you have your kind of custody hardware, things like Bob Wallet or Gohan, which is a wallet that I made. And then on top of that, you have your apps, or the apps that you make. Because now, like I mentioned at the beginning, is the best possible time to get involved in Handshake. I kind of like this diagram. I know that I made it and I'm not supposed to toot my own horn, but the reason why I like it is that it kind of shows that every layer of the sort of crypto stack can enable a number of layers above it. Without Handshake, there's no Bob Wallet, there's no ShakeDex. But the better ShakeDex gets, the better people can build stuff on top of ShakeDex that, is interesting and drives utility and value to Handshake. And so to draw a parallel to another chain that's been very successful, I want to basically talk about Uniswap. So not everyone's familiar with Uniswap, but Uniswap is a decentralized exchange on Ethereum. Total value locked, it's sort of a crypto specific metric, but for those of you who aren't sort of super into crypto, you can think of it as if Uniswap were a bank, how many assets does it manage? Even though Uniswap doesn't really manage anything because it's decentralized, but that doesn't really matter. Just think of it as the number of assets that people are putting into this exchange. You can see that for a really, really long time, no one was using Uniswap for anything. And then all of a sudden, around about August, September of 2020, its value, the total value locked, exploded. What created that jump in the total value locked? Well, it's this thing called DeFi Summer. People realized that they could use Uniswap as this kind of infrastructure layer to facilitate the exchange of Ethereum tokens. And they then built all kinds of cool and interesting and fun things on top of that. And then people built things on top of that, etc. And the impact that this one team, the Uniswap team, has had on Ethereum as a whole has been enormous. Up until very recently, they were under 20 people. But that's the power of these open networks. Uniswap did not have to ask permission to build their exchange. They just went and did it. And then other people went and built on top of that. And that's now led to, Uniswap TVL of about, $6 billion and a total DeFi total value locked of, I think, over $100 billion. But I'll have to check on the actual number. It changes on a daily basis. But anyway, the point is, these are the type of outcomes that you can create if you embrace the permissionless innovation that crypto provides you. ShakeDex is just one such project. I'm just one anime character in a basement somewhere. And, I was able to create this thing without asking for anybody's permission. And It's seeing a degree of success despite how difficult it is to do things on Handshake. If you're interested in getting started, this is the time to do it. And you've got people like me who are happy to donate our time to kind of onboard you into the community and make sure that you're able to feel as welcomed as possible and do amazing things on top of this ecosystem. So that's about the end of my talk. Depending on how much time we have left, I'm happy to take questions. I'm going to have to minimize the screen share to see the chat. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time. You can hit me up on Twitter, KurumiAmari1, KurumiAmari at protonmail.com. Don't forget the one on Twitter. The person who has the @KurumiAmari handle is weird. And then where else can people hit me up? Discord has a number that I can't remember on the end, but whatever. Twitter and email are good ways to hit me up, and then we can go from there if you're interested in chatting with me. Otherwise, thank you very much. Okay, looks like we have a lot of questions coming in. Anonymous user asked, there's a limit to the number of TLDs that Handshake supports. Yes. This is a sort of undocumented limit, but basically, from what I understand, the tree, the Handshake Urkel tree has a maximum number of nodes that it can support, and that number is approximately 50 million. Let's see. Anything else? And that's just on layer 1. TLDs can expand with layer 2 solutions like Footnote. Yes, that's true. From my understanding, Footnote basically partitions the space that a TLD has into sort of subdomains effectively. And also, these are just TLDs, right? Because the TLDs plug into the domain name system, then you can create effectively infinite subdomains as a result of that. Will traditional English auctions be supported? Yes, if I can figure out how to do it well. There's a kind of online way of doing it that requires a centralized intermediary. There's a Handshake improvement proposal out for it. By the way, all these things are based on Handshake improvement proposals, and the underlying protocol was dreamed up by Matt Zipkin and Mark Tyneway, so huge props to them. But the answer is yes. I'll try and support those as soon as I find a good way to do it that doesn't compromise too much on decentralization. Anything else? I've got 1 or 2 minutes left. I'm actually very surprised it took me that long. Every time I did it in practice, it was way shorter, so I guess I just really slowed things down. What's to stop someone buying Google.com and Handshake and basically parking it? .com is reserved, as are the top 100,000 Alexa domains, so you cannot buy Google.com for 2 reasons on Handshake.
All right, well, Karumi, thank you for coming on. It was great talk. I hope everybody here learned a little bit more about ShakeDex and decentralized exchange of names. Is there anything else? I know you kind of plugged everything that you wanted to. Is there any kind of last words that you want to kind of say?
Nope. Just hit me up if you want to get involved in the space. I should also find some things if people want to contribute directly to ShakeDex. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what people go out and build. Can I type my social links in? Yes. Kurumi Amari1. There we go. That's the main one. The best one.
And I just want to say this too. Everybody in the Handshake community is really easy to reach out to and get in contact with if you want to build something with them or build in tandem with them or want to just bounce ideas off of somebody, where everybody is really open to communicating here.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have to be. I mean, that's one of the great things about the space. You want as much collaboration as possible because the more collaboration, the better the utility of the chain and the more money everybody makes.
All right. Well, I think we're going to sign off now. We're going to have a little buffer, and then next we're going to have Mike Carson on, who's going to talk about Forever Domains. Again, really great to have you on, Kurumi.
Thanks, Fistful. It's great to finally put a voice to the frog. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
Yeah, man. Talk to you later, buddy.
Later. Bye.